If you'd like online business explained to you in a way that you can actually understand, go to latenightim.com/explain. It's completely free, and I made it just for you. Now, how about an episode?
Episode 126.
Late Night Internet Marketing.
This week on the Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast, we talk all about calls to action. Not only when to do them, but why to do them, and maybe most importantly, how to do them correctly. All this and more on the Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast.
The Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast.
You've been working for somebody else, but you want a business to run yourself. You want to know how to start, where to begin. Can you get out your comfort zone, my friend? Yes, you can do it right when it's late at night. At the end of the day, your dreams burning inside. So keep it up and you will find that you're building your business one night at a time.
And now, broadcasting late at night from a little studio in the big state of Texas, your host, Mark Mason.
Hey, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. I am Mark Mason, back on the mic from Dallas, Texas, where it's surprisingly warm. I have been under the weather, and I don't know if it's the change in the weather or what the heck was going on, but last week it warmed up, and I think the cedar bloomed, and I had this massive allergy conundrum. I mean, I couldn't even hardly see to drive. My eyes were watering, all puffed up. I looked like a marshmallow face clown, like one of those really ridiculous allergy commercials. And it didn't matter what I took, nothing would touch it. And that thing, that mess, that allergy mess that I had turned into what I think was a sinus infection. And all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was down for the count with 103 fever, which for an old guy like me, 103, that's Fahrenheit, by the way, 103 Fahrenheit fever is super high. I mean, I was just like, wow, wiped out. But I'm feeling better now. The good news is I had a chance to actually finally start to watch Breaking Bad, which is something that everyone on the planet has seen except for me. So I watched the first season of Breaking Bad. That was pretty cool, and I'll be finishing that. I didn't get totally into it the way so many people describe. I thought it was good, and I will finish watching it. So that was kind of interesting, but I'm back now. I'm feeling better, and I wanted to get back to talking about calls to action this week. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you about this marketing experience that I had with my Apple AirPods. I just got these amazing, fantastic Apple AirPods finally after ordering them. I was a little late, and by a little late, I mean a few days late ordering them when they came out. And I finally just got my Apple AirPods in the mail, actually in the last couple of days. And I tell you what's amazing about these, if you don't have them, or if you haven't heard of them, they're basically the regular Apple EarPods, or something that looks very similar to that, without wires. They work with Bluetooth. So they're wireless Bluetooth earpieces, which is awesome. And I have had many pairs of wireless Bluetooth headphones. I've had the Blue Buds and various others. And all of these devices have the following two problems that drive me absolutely crazy. One problem was when you go to use your Bluetooth headsets, and this is a problem that I always had, they always seem to be out of batteries. And not only that, in order to charge them, you had to find a special cable. Sometimes it wasn't all that special, but it was a particular cable, like a micro USB cable. You had to usually pop off some little cover and stick that thing in there. And if you didn't have that charger with you, like if you were on the road, you were just stuck and you couldn't use your headsets. I can't tell you how many times with my Blue Bud X's that happened, where I'd go to use them and I had accidentally left them on. That was another thing. Maybe a third thing is the controls on them weren't all that great. So sometimes it was hard to tell if they were on or off. So I had that problem. And then the other problem that used to drive me crazy about Bluetooth headsets is sometimes they would pair, sometimes they wouldn't. And if I wanted to use them with my laptop, that would confuse my phone and it would be hard to get them to switch back and forth. Sometimes this worked just great. And sometimes it was just so frustrating it wouldn't work. And so eventually, in every case, when I had these Bluetooth headphones, I would try them, I would use them for a while, and I'd finally give up on them because they're too much of a hassle. Well, Apple did the thing that Apple does best, in my opinion, is that they recognized something that was going on in the marketplace, but that wasn't solved very well. And they went in and they just crushed the solution. So with these Apple AirPods, what happens with them is they pair completely seamlessly. In order to pair these with Apple hardware, all you have to do is open the lid and your phone says, "Oh, I see Apple AirPods," and they're instantly paired. And using them between the laptop and the iPad and the watch is really easy. It uses iCloud to move that pairing configuration around between your devices. And so that's been completely seamless and very easy for me, and they've worked flawlessly. The other thing that is great about these is they come in a little case, which helps keep you from losing them. And that case will actually charge them. So whenever you put them away, even if they're not plugged in, you're charging them. So they're always essentially charged, which is really amazing. So at night, I plug that little case in. Just when I put my watch away, I put those away, and everything charges overnight. And the next day, the AirPods are ready to go for the entire day. You can charge them 4 or 5 or 6 times out of the case, and they work flawlessly. It's really cool. So this is interesting because of the marketing lesson here. And the marketing lesson here is Apple identified a gap in the market and they did it better. They took a crowded thing in the market, which is headphones. I mean, gosh, headphones are a dime a dozen, and even Bluetooth headphones you can buy, big ones and little ones and cheap ones and expensive ones. Bose has incredibly expensive ones. Amazon has really, really cheap ones, and none of them are great because of this fundamental limitation. So they went in and solved the fundamental limitation, and I can't get enough of this product. Well, that applies to what we're doing in internet marketing too. What is the fundamental limitation that you're solving with your product that you're creating? If you're creating a piece of content, what is the other content out there doing? And what makes your content not just a Me Too piece of content, but actually a content that does something just a little bit better, or maybe in some cases like the AirPods, a lot better than the content that's out there. And this applies in affiliate marketing just as well. If you're doing a product review and you look at the other product reviews, what are they missing? Is it a comparison table? Is it some analysis of the real benefits of the product? Is it having everything all in one place? Is it the fact that they don't deal with the latest, they don't review the latest product that's really out there, or maybe they don't tell you the limitations. Maybe the reviews out there are all positive and there's no review out there that tells you the downside of the product that's being created. Whatever it is out there, there's usually always a way that you can take a look at what your competition is doing and fill a gap that they're not meeting. And I want to encourage you to do that in whatever you do. Do the thing that you're going to do, and then pause and wait a second and see if you can think of the extra thing that you can do to make your stuff really special. This will make a difference in how people look at your content, how well it converts, and whether or not you can differentiate yourself in a really noisy marketplace.
It's time to get to work. One night at a time.
One night at a time.
Okay, so last week we talked about calls to action, and you'll recall that all of this was motivated by Cliff Ravenscraft's podcast about call to action fatigue. I listened to that podcast and I understood what Cliff was talking about. He started off calling it product launch fatigue. Then he started talking about call to action fatigue, and it made me think of calls to action in general. Now, I, kind of tongue in cheek, took that a step further and did no calls to action in my last episode and kind of made a joke out of it. And I didn't have any calls to action. In fact, I didn't even play my outro. That was kind of funny. I got feedback from people that said, hey, look, don't stop doing calls to action. We get it. We know that you need to do calls to action. I know that. I was just trying to make kind of a tongue-in-cheek point there. And Cliff wanted to clarify. Cliff listens to the show, which is very flattering for me. Cliff listens to the show, and he wanted to give this feedback to make sure that you guys understood. He wasn't talking about all calls to action, because some calls to action are really important. Let's listen to a snippet, at least, of the 5-minute audio that Cliff sent me by email right here.
By the way, real quickly, last week's episode is not talking about those call to actions. I believe your show should naturally, organically have call to actions. Call to action on, hey, I want to give you a call to action. There's this Yoast plugin and this article I read. It cleared up everything. And I want to encourage you, check out that article. You can find that in the show notes at latenightim.com/whatever. That's very natural. These kind of call to actions are perfectly fine. What I was concerned about is, number one, like a product launch from a huge online influencer, and they launch a product, and if you're subscribed to 15 podcasts that you listen to every single week and you never miss an episode, for 4 weeks during the launch, every episode for 4 weeks of 9 of the 15 episodes you listen to every week, the content is clearly designed to sell that product and that call to action. And oftentimes, the person doing the product launch is the guest on every single one of those 9 shows. And then, of course, there is the obsessive calls to actions, especially front-loading your show. It's a combination of all of those things. But I just want to say that it's not about don't ask for anything. Don't do any call to action. Play your jingle that has your call to action to check out the show notes and to get your free newsletter and stuff like that. And, of course, just be careful how much you're asking your audience to do. By the way, asking your audience to do you a favor or asking your audience to do something that's going to be a favor to them, completely different things. For example, hey, if you want to hear more about this article, go over to the show notes at this, url.com/whatever. That's a resource that you're giving to them if they're interested. We should embrace call to action. We want to engage with our audience. We want them to take action, to do things. And I think that's a valuable part, but just be careful of how much extra stuff we throw into the mix. And specifically, I was talking about hyper loading how many things we're selling people. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Mark, I love you, brother. I can't wait till you're back on the show, either next week or the week after. Looking forward to it.
So clearly Cliff is saying, look, he was talking about these big product launches mostly, but I do think there is this kind of question still about the integrity of the content that's being created, and the point that I made last week that if you have too many calls to action, it starts to pollute your content. And that's not a phrase that I came up with. It's actually a phrase that I heard Ray Edwards use in that episode last week on Cliff's show, was that if you start having so much promotion in your content that it starts to influence what it is that you're talking about, and it starts to kind of junk it up. And so I think that is something that you want to be careful about. On the other hand, I really do believe that most of the content that you create, if not all of the content that you create, should be created for a purpose. Sure, there is a reason that sometimes you might just want to rant on a topic or do some kind of public service announcement, although even public service announcements typically have some call to action to go do some good in the world. But there might be some reason that you just want to say something colorful. But even when you're talking about something like the Apple AirPods that I was talking about earlier, the call to action there is for you to create better content. Go do something. And I think if you're not, let's be specific, if I'm not delivering content that motivates you to go do something, and if I'm not encouraging you to do something, I'm not doing it right. And sometimes the thing that I want you to do is actually going to result in the exchange of money between you and me, or you and me and a third party. And I think that's when it gets a little goofy. And, it's not just marketers that have this thing that they have to worry about. It's even, churches, they ask you for money. And a lot of times I think a lot of people are weirded out by that. So when you're called to action to exchange money, sometimes that can feel a little weird. And I think the issue always comes back to value, at least in the marketing space. Is the value that you're delivering, does it justify the exchange of value in the form of money back in the other direction? And I think even maybe more importantly, are you doing it for the right reason? Look, we all understand that most people that are doing business, perhaps all people who are doing business well, are doing it at least in part because they need to create value for themselves out of that in the form of money. But it's really can be oftentimes a question of, is their heart in the right place? Are they trying to exchange value in a fair and even and robust way with you, which is kind of idea that free market economies are based on? Or are they trying to just get at your wallet at any cost? And we've talked about this before, but I think these calls to action can be done in a right way. I think the number one thing is, and the first recommendation I have for you with regards to calls to action is, are your calls to action being made with integrity? So are you making this call to action because you don't really care about the prospect, the outcome? All you really care about is making the sale? Or are you making the call to action because you really believe that the value that's being delivered is worth whatever the price is? If the call to action is to join an email list, are you really doing that just because you know that every subscriber is worth $1.27 and you don't really care whether they get value or not? Or are you doing it because you know the value that is being delivered is really worth the time that people are going to spend reading those emails? And I think that's really important. Not everybody thinks that's important, but I think that that's a really important foundation that you want to have in your business, is to have integrity in the calls to action that you issue. Now, if you get that first one right, a lot of other stuff sort of takes care of itself. But the second thing that I think is really important for good calls to action is that you need to make sure that you have a clear value proposition stated in your call to action. You want somebody to do something. Why is it good for them to do it? Why do you want them to do it? What's the benefit for them doing it? And it's really important that you focus on that benefit, that outcome that they're going to receive, rather than the features. It's not a list of 13 items that will help you write better copy. It's a copywriting checklist that will help you win more clients. You really want to emphasize the value proposition, that if someone takes the time to go get this checklist or do the thing that you asked them to do, whatever it is, that when they're done, they will receive some benefit. They'll derive some benefit by taking the action that you have described. The third tip for calls to action, I think, is to make them big. Make a big deal out of your call to action. If one is true, if you've got integrity in your call to action and you've decided this really is a good thing to do, a good call to action will be prominent. It will, if it's on a landing page, it will be the one thing that they can do there. If it's in a podcast, it will be clearly, enthusiastically stated that they really think that you should go do this. And the reason is that if you're going to take the time to actually call someone to action, I think it's really important that you sort of go big or go home. Go ahead and make it clear that you really believe that this is something that the prospect should go do. It will help you with your conversions, and it will help amplify this integrity that you have in item number one, and it will help emphasize the benefits that they're going to derive that you've described in item two. So number three is to, when you do your calls to action, sort of go ahead and go big or go home. Make your call to action prominent. Now, number four tip on great calls to action sort of goes without saying, and that is make sure that when the prospect takes your call to action, that they actually get what you promised. So there's a couple of aspects to this. One is to clearly describe what it is that they're going to get, which also goes to this item number two, not only the benefits, which are described in item two, but the features. Exactly what is it? It's a beautiful PDF with 17 tips that are actionable and so on and so forth. And when you take those actions, you're going to get these benefits. But make sure that's really what it is. A lot of times what you can see is someone will tout the benefits of this ebook, and you opt into this call to action to receive the ebook, and it's just really not all that great. Or it's cheaply done. They've invested all of this effort into setting all this call to action up, but the downloadable product is not great. Sort of the absolute opposite of this would be Pat Flynn's ebooks like Email the Smart Way. You download that thing, and it's probably the most beautiful, most action-packed, information-filled ebook you've ever seen. So that's sort of a contrast. You want to deliver massive value. This is a good time to really over-deliver, but make sure that the call to action, that the result of the call to action that you make actually matches what you promised. That's really important, because if there's a disconnect in what you promised and what they get, not only are they not going to get the benefit that you promised, which is important to the item, item number one about having integrity in your offers, but they're not going to trust you to take future calls to action. That's going to be an issue for you. And the number five tip, which you hear a lot of times, is when it's possible, test your call to action. Now, with the podcast, we don't really do this because I don't distribute multiple versions of the podcast to see which calls to action work the best. Certainly possible to do that. I just don't do that. But with website calls to action and other calls to action in copy, you definitely can find massive benefit in split testing things like headlines and graphics and other things. And tools like Lead Pages and to some extent some of these other pop-up providers, ConvertKit, can do some can do a little bit of split testing in the case of ConvertKit, a lot of split testing in the case of something like Lead Pages. But you definitely want to test colors and graphics and headlines. And you'd be shocked by two things. I think if you ever did any actual split testing, every time I do split testing, I'm always amazed by two things. One is the things that you don't think are going to matter oftentimes matter a whole lot. Little things like small changes in the headline, changes in the color, small changes in the graphic, or sometimes total changes in the graphic, changing from a left-facing face to a right-facing face. All kinds of weird, strange things can affect the conversion rate of calls to action. And then the other thing that consistently, and maybe this is just because I'm maybe a little too arrogant, the things that change, the things that make a difference are just impossible for me to predict. You get the weirdest results sometimes, and you cannot even imagine why call to action A is better than call to action B, but it is. And the data are clear. It's just really hard to explain sometimes, or sometimes you can explain it. And maybe I guess what I would say is it's hard to predict ahead of time exactly what calls to action are going to be the best. So if you can, be sure and split test your calls to action. And then last tip I'll give you for calls to action, as long as you're paying attention to number one and having integrity in your call to action and doing things for the right reason. The sixth tip I'll give you is take advantage of what's called FOMO, the fear of missing out, or urgency or scarcity. If it's appropriate and it makes sense, your calls to action can be a lot more effective if there's some urgency. For example, for a limited time, we're going to be offering blank, and you can go get that by going to this link. And after next week, it's going to be gone for whatever reason. One place where this works really well, I think, is webinar replays. So if you give a webinar or webinars in general, those things are a particular time. And after a time, if you don't make the webinar, it's either gone or the replay is there, but it's only there for a short time. That would be an example, the call to action to go watch that because it's going to disappear soon. That's something that I actually, I respond to those calls to action because there are cases where I don't want to miss out on whatever that content is, and I know it's going away. Now, the integrity thing comes in because you need to have, in my opinion, you want to have a good reason for that scarcity. It is a little frustrating when someone makes something scarce for no reason, or they talk about the scarcity of a digital product, which is there are only 17 copies being sold, but there's really no reason for that. And they don't tell you why, those kind of things that are clearly scarcity for scarcity's sake. I think that can backfire on you. But if you've got a real reason for something being scarce or people missing out on an opportunity because it literally is only happening for a while, like the sale at Target is only this week, you see that all the time. And after this week, the sale goes away. That's the kind of urgency, a fear of missing out sort of element that you want to take advantage of in your calls to action. So those are 6 tips, and I hope those will help you with your calls to action. If you keep those 6 tips in mind, your calls to action will be a lot better moving forward. Okay, so that's it for this week. Next week, I have an absolutely amazingly fantastic interview for you with Terry Dean. You're going to love it. And it's all about email and email marketing, which is something we all should be doing and doing better. And Terry's going to help you do that. You're going to love this interview. I've known about Terry for years and years and years and years since I started marketing back in 2007, but we've never actually met or talked on the phone until earlier last week. So that's a great interview. I'm really excited about that. I hope you'll come back next week and listen to that interview. That interview will only be online for 20 minutes and then it will go away. No, I'm kidding. That's false scarcity. I'm not going to do that to you. But come back next week. That's my call to action for you on that, and listen to the Terry Dean interview. Until then, I hope you have an amazing, productive, outstanding week, and you get all kinds of stuff done. I'll talk to you next Thursday. Take care. Ciao.
You can do it right when it's late at night.
You've been listening to the Late Night Internet Marketing Podcast.
Be sure to visit latenightpodcast.com today to leave feedback for Mark. Download special bonus content, access the show notes, and more. See you there.
Until then, go and make some great progress on your internet business. one night at a time.
One night at a time.
Man, you could probably still hear it in my voice. I was so sick. I never get sick because I'm a bulletproof trained professional, but boy, I was taken down. I was at my day job and it was Thursday and I had just released the last episode of the podcast. I didn't feel very well, but I went to work anyway because that's the kind of guy I am. I show up, and by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was just not feeling well. So I told my team, guys, I'm going home. I will see you tomorrow. And Friday morning came and I could tell I was worse. So I got to help my wife get the kids off to school, and I just kind of went back to bed. And I figured, well, I'll just take a day of vacation. I'll lounge around. Maybe I'll answer some email and stuff like that. And by the afternoon, my fever had spiked up. I had these chills, and I knew I must have a fever. And I had crashed upstairs so that I wouldn't germ up my wife. And I came down and got the thermometer, and sure enough, 103 Fahrenheit. Now, for those of you in Europe that are listening to this podcast, that's almost 40 C. So my body temperature was 40 C. In Fahrenheit, normal is 98.6. And of course, in Celsius, normal is 37. So 40 C, man, I was burning up. For an old guy, that's a big fever. So I'm feeling better now. I'm not 100%. Like I said, you could probably hear that in my voice. I'm coughing a lot, which I've edited out of this. Hopefully you didn't get any coughing in your ear during this podcast, but I'll be better next week, and Terry Dean will be here, and that will be fun. Talk to you later. Ciao.
Late night internet marketing.
Hey, it's Mark again. I wanted to tell you one more time about this absolutely free resource that I have for helping people who are trying to get the big picture for internet marketing, actually get started and understand what all their choices are. If that's not you, there's no more content. You can skip to the end. But if you're someone who came to this podcast because you're searching for how to get started online and you just can't cut through all the noise, I get it. That was me in 2007 when I was trying to get started. There were so many people throwing offers at me that I really couldn't even understand what all the different business models were. I couldn't understand how money moved around on the internet. And I couldn't really get a grip on what direction I wanted to go in so I could figure out how to move forward. I've created a free video resource for you just for that purpose at latenightim.com/explain. In several short videos, I just explained to you what internet marketing is all about and what online business is all about and the different options that you have for starting an online business. There's nothing to buy there. You just sign up for access and you get the videos just like that. So if that's interesting to you, or if you know someone who's in a same situation, send them that link, latenightim.com/explain. And let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what people are thinking that are in the exact same position that I was in more than a decade ago in 2007. In some ways, it seems like yesterday. And in some ways, it seems like an entire lifetime ago. Again, that's latenightim.com/explain.
Late night internet marketing.